The kitchen table was small, scratched pine, second-hand, squeezed into a cramped Mount Vernon apartment that cost $60 a month and felt like half that in the winter when the radiator clanked but barely heated. It was 1951, and Lillian Menashe Hochberg sat at that table at 2 in the morning, 7 months pregnant, writing addresses on envelopes by hand while her husband Sam slept in the next room. Her fingers ached, her back ached, everything ached, but she kept writing. Because $16, the last $16 they had after paying rent and buying groceries, was riding on what happened next. How does a 22-year-old housewife, pregnant with her first child, with no business experience and almost no money, build an empire? How does she go from a kitchen table in Mount Vernon, New York, to becoming the first woman to take a company public on the American Stock Exchange? This is that story, and every word of it is true. Lillian was born Lilly Menashe in Leipzig, Germany in 1927, a Jewish girl in a country that was about to become hell on earth. She was 12 years old when Kristallnacht shattered the illusion that things might get better, when synagogues burned and shops were destroyed, and the message became clear: leave or die. Her family fled to Amsterdam in 1937. 2 years later, the Nazis invaded Holland. Lillian was still a child, just turning 12 when the deportations began, when neighbors disappeared overnight, when fear became the air you breathed. Somehow, miraculously, the Menashe family survived. They hid, they waited, they endured. And in 1937, before the war truly began, they managed to secure passage to America on one of the last ships that would take Jewish refugees without turning them away at the harbor. New York City, 1937. Lillian arrived speaking German and Dutch, but almost no English. She was 10 years old, carrying everything she owned in a single suitcase, stepping onto American soil with her parents and siblings into a country that offered safety but not comfort, opportunity but not certainty. The family settled in Washington Heights neighborhood where German Jewish refugees clustered together, speaking the old language in grocery stores and bakeries, trying to rebuild lives that had been shattered across an ocean. Lillian's father found work, barely enough. The family lived in a railroad apartment, rooms connected in a straight line, no privacy, everyone always underfoot. Lillian learned English fast. Had to. She went to public school, graduated, took secretarial courses because that's what immigrant girls did if they were smart and wanted work. She learned to type 60 words per minute, learned shorthand, got a job as a secretary at a textile company in the garment district, taking the subway every morning at 7:30, coming home at 6, handing her paycheck to her parents because that's what daughters did. In 1949, at a community dance in Washington Heights, she met Sam Hochberg. He was handsome, funny, ambitious in the way young men were ambitious in post-war New York. Big dreams, modest means, absolutely certain that America owed them a future. He worked in sales, made decent money, wore nice suits. They married in 1950. Simple ceremony, modest reception, the kind of wedding you have when you're starting from nothing and building towards something. Sam wanted to start a business. He'd always wanted to start a business. He talked about it constantly. Importing leather goods, maybe, or opening a store, something that would make them independent, wealthy, secure. But capital was the problem. They had none. His salary covered rent and food and little else. Lillian had stopped working after the wedding. That's what wives did in 1951. And suddenly their income was halved. Then Lillian got pregnant, summer of 1951. She was 22 years old, morning sick, exhausted, watching their small savings dwindle while Sam's business dreams remained exactly that, dreams. But Lillian had an idea. It started with a purse, a leather purse she'd bought at a small shop in Manhattan, beautifully made, well priced. She noticed women complimenting it everywhere she went, On the subway, in the grocery store, at the doctor's office. "Where did you get that?" they'd ask, and she'd tell them, and they'd write down the address. And one day, sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through mail-order catalogs, Sears, Montgomery Ward, the thick books that arrived twice a year and offered everything from dresses to furniture, she had a thought. What if she could sell personalized leather goods through mail order? Not just any leather goods, personalized, custom, monogrammed handbags and belts with people's initials stamped in gold leaf, making ordinary items feel special, luxurious, unique. In 1951, personalization was rare, expensive, something rich people had done at department stores. But what if she could offer it affordably, through the mail, to ordinary American women who wanted to feel special? Sam thought it was worth trying. They had almost nothing to lose. Lillian calculated the startup costs. She needed to place an advertisement in 17 magazine, a small ad, black and white, offering monogrammed purses and belts by mail order. The ad would cost $95. She needed inventory, leather goods she could buy wholesale and personalize, another $50, maybe $60 if she bargained well. She needed business cards, printed envelopes, stamps for mailing. Total startup capital needed, approximately $164. They had $16 in their savings account. Lillian did something extraordinary. She went to her father and borrowed $2,000, an enormous sum for a working-class immigrant family in 1951, money her father had saved meticulously over 14 years in America. "I'll pay you back," she promised, "with interest." He looked at his pregnant daughter, at her determination, at the business plan she'd written by hand on lined notebook paper, and he believed her. September 1951. Lillian placed her first advertisement in 17 magazine. A tiny ad, just a few column inches, buried among hundreds of others. It showed a simple illustration of a handbag and a belt with text that read, "Personalized handbags and belts. Your initials in genuine gold. $2.99 each plus shipping. Send orders to Vernon Specialties Company, Mount Vernon, New York." She'd named the company after their town, Vernon Specialties. Simple, memorable, American. And then she waited. The ad ran in the October issue, which hit newsstands in mid-September. Days passed. Nothing. A week. Nothing. Lillian's anxiety grew. What if nobody ordered? What if she just wasted $95, nearly a week of Sam's salary, on an advertisement that would produce nothing? Then the letters started arriving. First 3 in one day, then 7 the next day, then 12, then 23. Orders, handwritten on notebook paper, on the backs of envelopes, on whatever paper people had. Girls and women writing from Ohio, from California, from Texas, from small towns and big cities, enclosing money orders and personal checks, and sometimes cash folded into the letters. "Please send one black handbag with initials MES in gold. I'd like 2 belts, one brown and one black, both with the initials JAR. This is for my daughter's birthday. Can you ship by November 3rd? Within 2 weeks, Lillian had received 32 orders. At $2.99 per item, that was $95.68 in revenue. After costs, wholesale price of goods, personalization, postage, she'd net maybe $40. It wasn't much, but it was proof. Her kitchen table became command central. Every evening after dinner, after Sam came home from work, after she'd cooked and cleaned and prepared for the baby that would arrive in February, Lillian would sit at that table and work. She'd open the day's mail, sorting orders by date received. She'd record each order in a ledger, customer name, address, item ordered, amount paid, date received. Everything documented, everything organized. Then she'd package the orders that had arrived earlier in the week, after she'd taken them to the local leather shop to have the monograms stamped. Brown paper, string, mailing labels written by hand. She'd carry the packages to the post office herself, walking 4 blocks, even as her pregnancy advanced, because they couldn't afford delivery service. By December 1951, she'd received over 100 orders from that single magazine ad. Her father's $2,000 was being repaid, slowly but steadily. In February 1952, Lillian gave birth to her first child, a son, David. She took exactly 3 days off from the business. On the 4th day, she was back at the kitchen table, baby sleeping in a bassinet beside her, writing addresses and filling orders while her body was still recovering from childbirth. There was no maternity leave, no help, no staff, just Lillian, a newborn, a growing pile of mail orders, and a determination that bordered on obsession. Sam helped when he could, but he still worked full-time. The business was hers, her idea, her execution, her responsibility. By spring 1952, orders were arriving so consistently that Lillian placed a second advertisement, this time in Pageant magazine. More orders flooded in. Then she advertised in Ladies' Home Journal. Even more orders. She expanded the product line, personalized jewelry boxes, keychains, wallets, even personalized stationery. Anything she could source wholesale, personalize affordably, and sell by mail. The kitchen table wasn't big enough anymore. Orders covered every surface: the table, the countertops, chairs, part of the living room floor. Sam started complaining, gently, that their home looked like a warehouse. "Just until we can afford real office space," Lillian promised. But office space cost money they didn't have yet, so the apartment stayed cluttered, stayed chaotic, stayed filled with cardboard boxes and brown paper and string and the constant sound of Lillian's typewriter as she responded to customer letters. In 1953, she had an idea that would change everything: a catalog. Not a magazine advertisement, a full catalog, multiple pages, showcasing dozens of products, mailed directly to customers who'd ordered before and to new customers whose names she'd compile from mailing lists she could rent. Sam was skeptical. A catalog costs serious money to print and mail. What if people throw it away? They won't. Not if it's beautiful. Not if it shows them exactly what they can have. She was right. Her first catalog was 16 pages, black and white, printed on cheap paper. It featured 37 different products, all personalizable. She mailed 5,000 copies to previous customers and to names she'd rented from a mailing list company. The response rate was astonishing. 12% of recipients placed orders. That's 600 orders from a single catalog mailing. Lillian had discovered something powerful: repeat customers. People who'd bought once would buy again. The catalog gave them a reason to remember her company, to browse, to find gifts for friends and family. By 1954, Vernon Specialties was generating enough revenue that Sam quit his job to work with Lillian full-time. They rented a small office space, finally, above a bakery in Mount Vernon. 2 rooms, barely bigger than their apartment kitchen, but it was official, professional, real. Lillian was 27 years old, mother of a toddler, running a mail-order business that was growing faster than she dared imagine. But she was also exhausted, constantly exhausted, balancing motherhood and entrepreneurship before anyone called it that, before there were books or role models or support systems for women trying to do both. She worked until midnight most nights, slept 5 hours, woke with David, fed him breakfast, took him to her mother's house, went to the office, worked until 6, picked up David, made dinner, put him to bed, and returned to work. It was unsustainable. She knew it, but she also knew that if she stopped, even for a moment, the business might collapse. Everything depended on her: the orders, the inventory, the customer service, the bookkeeping, all of it. And yet, in those late-night hours at the office, packing boxes and addressing envelopes while Mount Vernon slept outside, Lillian sometimes smiled, because she was building something real, something hers. And the kitchen table that had started it all? She kept it. Even after they moved to a bigger apartment, even after the business outgrew its first office and then its second, she kept that scratched pine table, a reminder of where she'd started and how far she still intended to go. By 1956, Vernon Specialties had outgrown its second office and moved into a warehouse in Mount Vernon, 3,000 square feet of space that seemed enormous until inventory started arriving, and suddenly it felt cramped again. Lillian was 29 years old. She had 2 children now, David, 4, and Fred, born in 1954. She was managing a staff of 7 employees, 3 women who helped with packaging, 2 who handled correspondence, a bookkeeper, and Sam who managed operations. Revenue that year, $87,000. In 1956 dollars, that was substantial. Not wealthy yet, but successful, profitable, growing. But Lillian wanted more. She tasted success and found it addictive. The catalog was her weapon. Every year she expanded it. More pages, more products, better photography. By 1958, the Vernon Specialties catalog was 48 pages, full color on the cover, featuring over 200 personalized products. Handbags, yes, but also Christmas ornaments, luggage tags, address labels, desk accessories, even personalized playing cards. She mailed 500,000 catalogs that year. The printing and postage costs were enormous, nearly $40,000, but the return on investment made it worthwhile. Orders poured in, thousands per week during the Christmas season, the warehouse operating 16 hours a day, everyone working overtime. Lillian was there constantly, overseeing everything, checking quality, handling complaints, making decisions. She was the company, its brain, its standards, its driving force. But being a woman in business in the 1950s came with complications that male entrepreneurs never faced. Banks wouldn't give her loans in her own name. Every business loan had to be co-signed by Sam. Even though Lillian managed the finances, understood the numbers better, made the strategic decisions. The bank managers would address Sam during meetings, even though Lillian was answering all their questions. Suppliers sometimes refused to negotiate with her directly, insisting on speaking to the boss, meaning a man. She learned to send Sam to initial meetings, then take over once the relationship was established. And socially, she faced constant judgment. Other mothers at David and Fred's school would ask, in tones mixing curiosity and disapproval, "Don't you miss being home with your children?" As if working made her a bad mother, as if ambition and maternal love were mutually exclusive. Lillian smiled through it, kept working, kept proving them wrong. In 1960, she made a decision that terrified Sam and excited her. She changed the company name from Vernon Specialties to Lillian Vernon Corporation. "People should know it's a woman running this company," she said. "Women buy from us. They should know they're buying from another woman who understands what they want." It was risky. In 1960, female-owned businesses were rare enough to be novelties. Some marketing advisors warned that using a woman's name might hurt sales, might make the company seem less serious, less professional. They were wrong. Sales increased. Women loved knowing the company was female-owned and operated. They wrote letters saying so. "I'm proud to buy from a woman entrepreneur. It's wonderful to see a woman succeeding in business. Keep showing them what we can do." By 1965, Lillian Vernon Corporation was mailing 2 million catalogs annually and generating over $1 million in revenue. Lillian was 38 years old and had achieved something extraordinary. She'd built $1 million business from a kitchen table startup that began with 2,000 borrowed dollars. But $1 million in revenue didn't mean she was a millionaire yet. Profit margins were slim, 15 to 20% after costs. The business consumed most of its earnings in growth, more inventory, more warehouse space, more staff, more catalogs. Lillian took a modest salary, lived comfortably but not extravagantly, reinvested everything else back into the company. Because she saw what was happening in America, saw the opportunity that most people missed, The suburbs were exploding. Middle-class families had disposable income, and those families, especially the women managing households, loved shopping by mail. It was convenient, private, offered more selection than local stores. Mail order was the future, and Lillian was perfectly positioned to dominate it. She expanded the product line aggressively throughout the late 1960s and 1970s. Not just personalized items anymore, but housewares, kitchen gadgets, home decor, gifts, toys. If American women wanted it and would buy it through a catalog, Lillian would sell it. The catalog grew to over 100 pages, then 150, then 200. She mailed 6 million catalogs annually by 1970, then 12 million by 1975. The warehouse expanded again and again, first to 10,000 square feet, then 20,000, then a massive facility in Virginia Beach, Virginia, chosen specifically because of lower labor costs and proximity to major shipping routes. Lillian moved the entire company headquarters from Mount Vernon to Virginia Beach in 1970. It was wrenching, leaving New York, the city that had welcomed her family as refugees, the place where she'd built her life and business. But the economics were undeniable. Virginia offered tax advantages, cheaper real estate, a better labor pool. The move was risky. Some longtime employees couldn't or wouldn't relocate. Operations were disrupted for months. But Lillian managed it, as she'd managed everything else, through meticulous planning, tireless work, and absolute refusal to accept failure. By 1975, Lillian Vernon Corporation employed 250 people and generated $12 million in annual revenue. Lillian, now 48, was wealthy. Not spectacularly so, not private jet wealthy, but genuinely wealthy. She owned a beautiful home in Virginia Beach, drove a nice car, traveled, lived without financial anxiety for the first time in her life. But she wasn't satisfied. Satisfaction felt like complacency, and complacency felt like death. She wanted to go public, wanted to take the company public on the stock exchange, to prove that a business built by a woman from a kitchen table could stand alongside companies founded by Harvard MBAs and old money families. Going public meant scrutiny, audits, disclosure, giving up some control. Most advisors told her to stay private, stay comfortable, enjoy her success. Lillian ignored them. In 1987, Lillian Vernon Corporation became the first company founded by a woman to go public on the American Stock Exchange. The opening day was extraordinary. Lillian stood on the trading floor, 60 years old, wearing a perfect suit, watching her company's stock symbol appear on the board, and felt emotions she couldn't quite name. Vindication, pride, disbelief that the journey from a cramped Mount Vernon apartment to this moment was real. The stock performed well. Investors were impressed by the company's financials, consistent revenue growth, strong profit margins, loyal customer base, sophisticated inventory management, and cutting-edge use of data analytics to target mailings. Lillian Vernon Corporation was valued at over $60 million at IPO. Lillian's personal stake made her, officially, a millionaire many times over. She'd done it. Kitchen table to millionaire. 2,000 borrowed dollars to a publicly traded company. 22-year-old pregnant housewife to one of the most successful female entrepreneurs in American history. But here's what the financial headlines missed, what the business journals didn't capture: the cost. 2 marriages. Her marriage to Sam ended in divorce in 1969, strained by the pressures of business and conflicting ambitions. She remarried, divorced again. Building an empire meant sacrificing pieces of her personal life. Relationships with her sons were complicated. David and Fred grew up with a mother who worked constantly, who was often absent, who loved them fiercely but showed that love in unconventional ways, through providing, through building something they'd inherit, through demonstrating that success was possible. They understood later, as adults, appreciated what she'd built, what she'd taught them about work and determination. But those early years, when other mothers were home and theirs was at the office, left marks. Lillian never apologized for it, never regretted the choices. But she acknowledged in interviews later in life that success came with trade-offs. Always does. By the 1990s, Lillian Vernon Corporation was an American institution. The catalog was ubiquitous, 50 million copies mailed annually, one of the most recognized mail-order brands in the country. Revenue exceeded $250 million. Lillian remained CEO until 1989, then stayed on as chairman. She became a public figure, giving speeches about entrepreneurship, female empowerment, immigrant success stories. She wrote an autobiography, An Eye for Winners, detailing her journey from Leipzig to Virginia Beach, from refugee to millionaire. She was invited to the White House, featured in magazines, interviewed on television, became a symbol of what was possible when talent met opportunity, when determination refused to accept limitations. But she never forgot the kitchen table. In interviews, she'd always mention it, the scratched pine table where it all began, where she addressed envelopes at 2 in the morning while 7 months pregnant, where $16 felt like everything and nothing simultaneously. That table kept me humble, she said once. No matter how successful we became, I remembered what it took to get there. The fear, the uncertainty, the sheer amount of work. Success looks glamorous from the outside, but it's built on thousands of unglamorous hours that nobody sees. Lillian Vernon Corporation eventually faced challenges in the 2000s as e-commerce disrupted traditional catalog retail. The company was sold in 2003, struggled under new ownership, and eventually became just another brand in a portfolio rather than the independent force it had been. Lillian herself passed away in 2015 at age 87. But what she built, what she proved, remains. She proved that refugee girls could become millionaires, that housewives could become CEOs, that kitchen tables could be launching pads for empires, that 2,000 borrowed dollars and an extraordinary amount of determination could change not just one life, but thousands. The employees she hired, the customers she served, the women she inspired. In 1951, when Lillian sat at that table writing addresses while pregnant and exhausted and terrified, she couldn't have known how the story would end. She just knew she had to try. And that willingness to try, despite fear, despite obstacles, despite a world that told her women didn't build businesses, that's the real secret. Not some trick or hack or shortcut, just relentless, unglamorous, exhausting work. Day after day, year after year, envelope after envelope, catalog after catalog, decision after decision, until the kitchen table became a warehouse, until borrowed dollars became millions, until the pregnant housewife became the CEO, until the impossible became history. And if Lillian Vernon's story teaches us anything, it's this. The distance between where you are and where you want to be isn't measured in luck or connections or privilege. It's measured in work. And anyone willing to sit at that kitchen table at 2 in the morning and do what needs to be done can travel that distance, even if you're starting with just $2 and a dream. Especially then.